Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to 24/7's webinar, Tackling Parts Management and Cybersecurity with an Integrated CMMS Solution, co-presented by FSI, PartSource, and Cynerio. I'm Carrie Forsyth-Stevens, the editor of 24/7 and your host. I'm here today with two excellent speakers, Chad Holmes, Security Evangelist at Cynerio, and Sean Hewitt, Product Manager at FSI. After the presentation, Chad and Sean will answer as many questions as they can. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker, Sean Hewitt.
All right. Sorry, we didn't advance the slides here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Just a little bit about who FSI is. We're a comprehensive CMMS and enterprise asset management company. We offer solutions and services for both facilities management and HTM departments. Our solutions are healthcare centric, meaning that it's built by and for healthcare professionals. The value that FSI offers is to deliver innovation and intelligent tools. And really what we're trying to accomplish there is providing tools to drive your regulatory compliance, streamline your resource and financial cost controls, and really to deliver that exceptional operational efficiencies with customer experience across the environment of care. Really happy to be here today to talk about the value of the partnership we have with Chad and Cynerio and how integrations in general are really going to turn your CMMS into that central hub to manage your HTM workflows. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into it. So, what are we hearing at FSI from our HTM community? Really, it's around the challenges that most HTM groups face. Most HTM departments have to manage multiple solutions, different steps, different processes they have to use to either schedule the PM, go out there and track and find the asset that they're looking for, actually performing the work or the test of that piece of equipment, and then have to document that service status. So if you think about that kind of diagram that you see, the HTM department is in the middle, but very often they're needing to work with, identifying and quickly identifying if any of the devices have a recall on them, or maybe they're working on a specific piece of equipment and they need to order parts or materials to be able to accomplish that fix. Or maybe that piece of equipment that they're testing out requires a specific device testing protocol that they have to follow. Everyone's favorite, number one, being able to even track or locate the asset. A lot of our HTM groups explain that, it's an extreme challenge. They're walking around the hospital looking for those pieces of equipment and they just can't find them. So then that work gets pushed off and they're constantly needing to come back. And then, having those pieces of equipment that are more technically advanced that are on the hospital's network. We're going to be talking to Chad about that with, Cynerio and having those cybersecurity network devices. Going back, really the value that we're trying to bring again is having that integration of all of these multiple systems and processes. Within our application, we're really looking to create that seamless workflow, or again, that central hub in your CMMS to manage your HTM operation. So let's look at it a different way. If FSI is in the center, kind of serving as that central hub for your asset management, your work order creation, and work order management, through the power of our FSI public API, we're able to integrate with a lot of different solutions that you're using in the hospital. So if we think about things like a device recall, imagine having an integration, with ECRI where you're going to get notifications of that device recall. Or as your technician's working on a piece of equipment and they're like, I need to order a part. Traditionally they may have to leave their CMMS, go to another solution, or pick up the phone and make a phone call to order that part. With that integration, right within the work order, you can click a button that would launch you into that part source application to then be able to quickly order those parts and have that flow and be part of that work order history. Device testing is another one. Imagine completing your work order and you need to use a specific device protocol through 1QA or Fluke. You know, within that work order, you can actually pull in that results of the pass-fail and actually have that as part of that work order history with all of the associated tests that were done. Asset location and tracking. A lot of hospital organizations use an RTLS solution where they tag their HTM equipment. So if they need to find it, that RTLS solution will give the most up-to-date location. And that works within FSI as well. So again, when you're working on that work order, you need to find that specific location. You'll see the location in the location field, but FSI also has what we call CMS view that gives a visual representation of your floor plan. So with that application, you can very quickly see where certain pieces of equipment are that you have to go perform activity on. And then of course, with our partners with Cynerio, having that device security, which we're going to talk about that, really having those HTM solutions that are networked, meaning they're on your hospital organization's network. And because they're on your network, they may be at risk for virus or vulnerabilities. You know, so the value in our partnership with Cynerio is as these pieces of equipment become more technically advanced, many of those devices with those capabilities are monitored by that cybersecurity group or that cybersecurity software for vulnerabilities. So at this moment, you know, I'm going to pass it off to Chad, and he's going to talk specifically on what and how our partners at Cynerio are helping HTM departments with their security, and more importantly, how the integration with FSI CMMS solution supports these HTM workflows. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chad.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean, and thank you all for joining us today. So as we get into this a little bit, I want to point out that quite often the focus with CMMS is HTM efficiency. We want to make sure we get as many people turning the wrenches as efficiently as possible to drive the cost down. What a lot of people don't understand, and Sean hit on a little bit, is that a very good CMMS system, if properly integrated and properly informed, provides an outstanding gateway to improving security throughout your organization. And as we see more and more cyber attacks on healthcare, whether it be ransomware, data breaches, malware, et cetera, we're starting to realize that not only is there a need for better security, but where we're lacking security has a real impact on hospital finances, care provided to patients, and even mortality rates, right? We see in about a third of the attacks that mortality rates go up, not because attackers are actually trying to kill patients, to put it bluntly, but because they're taking systems out that patients rely on. So we need to start thinking of cybersecurity in terms of natural disasters, almost power outages, blizzards, et cetera, in how they impact patients. And that's why we're so excited about our integration with FSI. FSI provides us an outstanding platform to help hospitals and healthcare facilities quickly extend their cybersecurity practices with modern protections on top of what they already have, right? This integration is going to allow us to effectively slow down these attacks, make sure that we're not paying ransoms, because people do pay ransoms, that's why these attacks happen, or that if we don't pay a ransom recover, that we're not seeing 9-figure recovery costs. So what Cynerio does is we're very much focused on healthcare, just like FSI, where they are healthcare centric, right? Built by and for healthcare pros. We are the same way. We are entirely healthcare focused. We have 4 core sets of products ranging from network detection and response down to medical device security. And as we start to look more and more into where the industry is going on with, around regulations, things like the recently released cybersecurity performance goals, we are providing full coverage for over half of those goals and informing the other half. So things like detecting attacks, finding asset inventory, et cetera. To stay on this topic and get back to CMMS a little bit, the other thing that's really, really cool about our integration and how CMMS systems and security tools like Cynerio work is that they're incredibly complementary in enriching data. So the first thing that you can see through our integration is that we're going to help anyone with FSI identify more devices, right? The nature of CMMS is you're going in, you're entering devices as they're coming in, as you're finding them, et cetera. But because you'll never know every device on your network unless you're monitoring for the network, right? You're not going to know the Amazon Alexas, the Teslas, the IV pump that may have moved from one location to another. we're going to help you identify more devices so your CMMS is actually more comprehensive, has richer data, has a better idea of the devices you not only need to maintain, but also secure. So that's the first way that our integration works really well together. Next is we're going to enrich data. Because so many of these devices are connected to the network, that network connection by default gives us more information about the devices. Sean was mentioning earlier, just finding out where the devices are so we can more efficiently find them. Well, the great thing is if you don't have our RTLS system in place, those devices are connecting to Wi-Fi points, which we can track them on. So if you have to go find IV pump A, B, or C, we're going to tell you, hey, it's within 30 feet of this. And if you have RTLS, even better, we're going to tell you within a few inches where it is. So not only are we identifying more devices, we're seeing more information about the devices, which is then going back into your CMMS. We're also giving you guidance like the digitized MDS2s. I think every HTM I've ever spoken to, every biomed I've ever spoken to, needs to get their hand on MDS2 and can often become a big runaround of searching where's the document, where's the digital stored. Well, one of the great things is as you're working with Cynerio, we're able to identify all your devices, pull an MDS2 that we already have in our database and provide you with that MDS2 on demand. So when you are working on that device, you have the data available to you. From there, we're able to start getting more into the security side of things, right? We're seeing more and more often HTMs and biomeds are being tasked with security efforts. Things as simple as, hey, go update the patch on product X. The challenge with that is, first, updating a patch across thousands of IV pumps can be incredibly challenging. It's just a logistical challenge. And then second, actually keeping up with that and having the technical know-how to do so can be even more complex, particularly when you're just trying to keep machines up and running, never mind protect them from hackers. So what we're able to do is as we're monitoring the network for traffic, for devices, we're able to identify the patch levels, we're able to identify where there may be vulnerabilities, and then we're able to take that information and prioritize your efforts. So you know when you have a critical patch, you know which devices should be patched in which order, so you're taking care of the most at-risk first and then working down the ladder. That prioritization is incredibly important because if we're just sending you 1,000 tickets, that's going to be overwhelming for your HTM team. So we've already started to enrich the CMMS. We've started to actually inform the patches. We prioritize those efforts. And then we get into the really deep cybersecurity. We're going to give you clear guidance on how you should better improve your environments, things like micro-segmentation. Think of that this way. We don't want all devices talking to each other. If Tesla's on your network, it should not be talking to a CT machine. So we're going to make sure those devices can't talk. And then the most powerful thing any hospital can do right now is improve their network detection, seeing what malicious traffic is going across the wire and stopping those attacks before they happen, whether it be ransomware, data breaches, malware, etc. And what we're finding is while a lot of hospitals have IDP, they have IDS, they might have hybrid cloud solutions that are doing some monitoring, the reality is that healthcare attacks continue to be on the rise and we continue to be the most attacked industry because we are not keeping up with the hackers. And so more advanced detection techniques like we see with our NDR tool are critically important. Sean, next slide, please. There we go. And so when we talk about cybersecurity challenges in HTM, I want to hit on a couple things. First, the problem has to be very simple because we see such widespread attacks in our industry, we can't go down the complex rabbit hole. We have to figure out what the real challenge is. And the challenge ultimately comes down to more. There are more devices online, those devices make more connections, and they have more vulnerabilities. And the reason for this is pretty simple. If you think of an IV pump from 1960, it was effectively medication, put it in the patient, boom, there's your IV. If you think of it now, it is a complex piece of machinery that is connected to a network. It has a plastic shell, it has buttons, it has a network card, it has multiple computer chips. It is 8 to 10 layers deep of technology versus the drip it just used to be. And because it's connected to the network, it is susceptible to attack, but it's also going to provide better patient care. So we need to recognize that not only do we have more devices, but the depth of those devices has introduced far more vulnerabilities. And one of the reasons that we're the most attacked industry in the critical infrastructure space is simply because we have underprotected ourselves for years and years and years, right? You don't see big financial industries, you don't see commercial entities attacked successfully at the rate healthcare is, simply because they have more resources, more time, more insight to the attacks, and can better protect them. Healthcare has fewer resources. It can be mistakenly said that every dollar not spent on patient care is in some way a wasted dollar. The reality is we know that dollars not spent on cybersecurity are leading to deferred care, poor outcomes, increased mortality rates. So we have to change that mindset. But at the end of the day, we've onboarded a lot of devices. They're incredibly complex. They're vulnerable in many ways, and we have not kept up with the security needed. So we have 4 core challenges that we're trying to solve. One is locating the devices, like I mentioned earlier, right? When you have 1,000 devices, 1,000 IV pumps, I love to pick on IV pumps, it can be hard to find them all. Every HTM team I've ever talked to has said IV pumps are notorious for disappearing into closets or disappearing up into ceilings where they're being hidden. We've seen some that have migrated 200 to 300 miles away to other facilities that are not located. So finding those so we can maintain those is really important, but also making sure that we're finding them so we can inform our purchasing decisions is also important. If we have 1,000, but only 700 are in operation, we can't find the other 300, it could be mistakenly said, hey, we need to buy 300 more rather than finding those and getting them online. So one, we need to start figuring out how to better identify the location of the devices. RTLS tends to do that, but that can be complex in deployment. Our method gives you a great gateway in saying, hey, it's within X number of feet of a Wi-Fi point. The next challenge we have is device risk. And I've picked on IV pumps a lot, so I'm going to pick on a few other things here, right? I pick on IV pumps because they are notoriously vulnerable. About 53% have a critical vulnerability, and they're so plentiful in environments. But we've also seen a lot of different devices that have vulnerabilities. We've seen stress test treadmills, right? You get on, you get stickers put on you, and you're going uphill really quickly. We've seen those infected and then trying to propagate attacks, collect data, and exfiltrate that data to Sirius. We need to be able to identify that quickly. We've seen microbial detection units in labs. They don't even have interfaces. They don't have a Windows operating system they're running on. It's a bespoke operating system. We've seen that trying to spread attacks as well. We've seen computers in the financial department with something called SecTop Rat, where they're taking screenshots of the financial information and sending that outside of walls. And then finally, I mentioned earlier briefly, but we routinely see Teslas, Amazon Alexas, Sony PlayStations, just myriad devices get on networks because they are a part of the care and healing process, even if you don't think of them that way. So we need to think about not only where those devices are, but also the risk that these large number of devices are introducing, particularly when they're not in our CMMS systems for proper maintenance. From there, we need to make sure we're prioritizing our efforts, right? I have a great heat map that I love to show people where it shows about 3,000 different bubbles of efforts that need to be made. And if those were put linearly just based on severity, everything tends to bunch in groups kind of towards most severe and towards the middle. But when we start looking at exploitability as well, so not only how severe is it, but how likely is it to actually be exploited, we get this nice two-dimensional graph that allows us to point HTM teams exactly where they need to go to make sure they're patching those devices in the most effective and efficient way. And again, at the end of the day, HTM efficiency is what it's all about. It's going to drive our costs down. It's also going to help us with the challenge of the workforce, right? We're seeing on average, we need 1 new HTM per hospital in the US each year. That's 6,000 to 7,000 hospitals, and I don't think that many people are graduating. So we need to figure out a way to make them efficient until we get more and more biomeds in the field. And prioritizing efforts is one way to do that. And then finally, we have to do a better job with incident response. Your hospital is getting attacked. You may not know it, you may be stopping those attacks, but hospitals are the prime target right now for hackers because the data in them is incredibly valuable, and we see a very large number of people pay the ransoms during a successful ransomware attack. So we need to figure out how to best respond to incidences when they occur. We've heard of cases where people actually tell their HTM team to start going around unplugging all medically necessary equipment, because that will help stop the spread of an attack. That's extreme, but also somewhat common. So as we're going through and we're working with CMMS systems, we're also identifying where we can improve processes to improve incident response. So in those critical moments, we're stopping those attacks. At the end of the day, CMMS are providing the gateway into cybersecurity, not just for HTM teams, but for broader teams, IT, security, and networking that are often understaffed, and giving them insight that they did not have before, which will allow them to better secure their environments. Sean, I just did a lot of talking, so I'll hand it back to you for the next slide.
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, you hit on something that resonates really well. I mean, people are saying this all across the board. There's fewer resources to manage all of this stuff. So the key words that you were saying are operational efficiency. You know, think about without an integration, you're often managing like a work order. You're going to try to find that piece of equipment, but maybe there is a piece of equipment that is on the network and you're not getting that information real time. You're needing to stop what you're doing, maybe get notified, some other process. That takes time. That takes valuable time that you could be working and ensuring patient safety on a lot of the other devices that you're managing. So, you know, I think that this integration is so important because it really does serve as that gateway for that more cybersecurity management within your CMMS for those pieces of HTM equipment. You know, so really what we're excited about with this partnership, if I take this slide and boil it down, it's really about, you know, Cynerio having that vulnerability event that's creating that real-time insight into those vulnerabilities, you know, and then that's going to automate the workflow through the integration. It really creates actionable notifications and work orders for the technicians or the HTM team members to be able to assign that work to go take care of it immediately, again, without needing to go do multiple steps to try to even know that there's a vulnerability that's been identified. And at the end of the day, it's all about ensuring the security of those HTM connected devices to make sure that the organization is hitting on their patient safety goals. You know, so when you think about those 3 blocks up on the screen, you have enhanced security. That's really the power that Cynerio is bringing to the table that allows people to reduce those risks of those data breaches and those general vulnerabilities for those network devices. You know, but then when you layer in that integration with FSI CMMS, that's really where the streamlined operations come in, the automation of the work order notifications, simplifying the identification of those vulnerable assets for proper management. And that third bullet's really important, streamlining that process, saving time and resources that can be allocated more effectively. You know, so the last 2 are really about, well, what's the value that this offers? Well, number one, it's going to create that user experience through the innovation, through that integration that's really going to simplify, you know, all of those multiple systems and steps where your HTM group can really manage that, you know, as a byproduct of working within their CMMS platform. You know, and from a customer benefit perspective, it all comes down to that transparency through the notification and work order to be able to quickly take action in that timely manner. You know, Chad, anything to add to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I think we're this, I'm not going to say dream situation, but we're in a really good situation where we have 2 complementary technologies that can replace a lot of the work that HTM teams are doing. And I've never had an HTM team say, hey, we have all the people, we have all the resources, we have everything under control, right? They're always kind of scrambling to keep up. And so it's not a case of, hey, we're replacing people's jobs. It's we're taking people that are overworked, overstressed, and giving them 2 complementary technologies that are not only allowing them to do their jobs more efficiently, but also introducing more security protections that they didn't have before. So it is really a winning situation all around.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, so with that, Carrie, I mean, I think that, you know, that's the message really on the powership of the integration between FSI and Cynerio. We're certainly open to the floor for discussions or questions that the group may have.
Thank you so much, guys. This has been wonderful. And I know our listeners will agree. To start for the Q&A, what are the biggest risks to hospitals right now?
Yeah, so I'll take that one. So the biggest risk is that we've adopted a lot of connected technologies in the last 15 years or so without putting the additional protections in place. So effectively, we've opened up a bunch of network connections that go right to the patients in some cases without making sure that they are not vulnerable to cyber attack. And what that's led to is attackers who used to avoid attacking healthcare, because there's a real big dose of evil when you do that. The money that is available to them is far too high for them not to attack us anymore. So the most common attacks we see are ransomware, right? We hear about ransomware quite a bit. It actually happens far more than we hear about it. Whether or not you would pay the ransom is not for me to say. It's an awful choice to have to make, but we do know that it gets paid up to half the time simply because it tends to get people back online quicker. I do not agree with that, but I understand why people will do it. So one is ransomware. The other way that people make money is through data exfiltration and selling records online. Effectively, if you sell a social security number online, it's worth about $1. If you sell credit card information online, it's worth about $5. And then if you sell patient data online, it's worth about $50 to $250. So there is a clear focus on stealing patient data because your data can't be canceled, it's immutable. It will always be there to help with fraud. So the biggest attacks are data breaches and ransomware attacks.
No, that's great. Okay, so when a cyber attack happens, what is the role of biomeds and HTM team members?
Yeah, it is to follow orders. And quite often it is to go, like I said, start unplugging machines, start making sure that the people that need critical care are getting the help they need. But ultimately, there is an incident response plan that will be in place, hopefully, not always. But ultimately, they need to report what they're seeing, and they need to follow orders and be a really good team player there. It's not unusual for some of the first devices to be encrypted to be seen by HTMs before anyone else. Right? If a CT machine, just as an example, is attacked, they're in there while it's there, and a ransomware note comes up on the screen, an HTM team member may be the first one there. Make sure you understand what your incident response plan is, who's in charge, who to report that to, and then fall in line as quickly as possible, because they'll likely bring in the FBI, incident response, et cetera, and need your help both physically and technically.
Okay,
and
great.
I'd like to add to the risk from that from another angle too. Obviously everything that Chad just spoke about, but because there's this increased volume of these network devices, it goes back to resources too. So, oftentimes HTM groups are, struggling to keep up with the volume of managing these assets. So, really without that streamlined process, without that streamlined operation to be able to know that these vulnerabilities even exist while they're trying to maintain and manage these pieces of equipment, that's a huge risk. So, poor resourcing, low resources to be able to accomplish this, and not a timely ability to respond to it.
Great. So when a CMMS is integrated with a security tool like Cynerio, how long does it take before security recommendations are available?
Yeah, I'll jump on that, and Sean, I'll let you add in. So the way that our security tools work is we're effectively watching network traffic. And we're sampling that network traffic to find information like the devices that are on the network, the vulnerabilities, et cetera. That's near real time, right? So again, if an IV pump is communicating with a nurse's station and is in the flow of our analysis, we're going to find that within minutes in some cases. More realistically, it takes about a month to build out a full inventory with a high degree of accuracy, but the initial results come through very quickly. On top of that, we take that information and through our integration with FSI, do both push and pull updates. So the data is replicated back to FSI rather quickly. Not quite real time. We tend to do that over a course of hours, but we're talking a matter of days and weeks, not months and years here.
Yeah.
Great. So finding HTM equipment or knowing that there are issues to follow up on are always a challenge. So with FSI's partnership with Cynerio and others, how does the FSI help the HTM technician know?
Yeah, so I can take this one, Chad. So, what Chad just described about when that vulnerability is identified through the integration, whether it's pushing or pulling information, we can then know that that vulnerability exists, and through that location tag, we know specifically or relatively where that piece of equipment is and where that vulnerability exists. So again, within FSI's platform, that could be in the list form. So as I get a new work order created, I could see, all right, this piece of equipment has a vulnerability. It's a work order. Here's the location. Through CMS View, I can actually visualize that on the floor plan to know that, okay, this piece of equipment is up on the 3rd floor and it's, down on the cardiac unit. So, just being able to use the power of the integration to get that information to them more real time to be able to action on it.
Great. So this is the last question. I really like this one, but what devices are typically used or supported by your HTM customers?
Yeah, so the HTM group, I mean, they typically are carrying around laptops. Some will go back to their office and manage their work through desktop, but we strongly encourage to be as mobile as possible. So, if you're carrying around your laptop, it could be a tablet. We even have some technology on a mobile phone that will kind of give you your list of work orders to go track and find and action on. So, it's kind of a myriad of different devices that we see. We support everything from the desktop to the laptop to the tablet to the mobile device.
And just to add to that real quick, from our side, we're not going to add any additional overhead to that, right? We want FSI to be your single pane of glass wherever possible. So we're going to integrate, provide the data there. We do have an additional dashboard available. But if you're comfortable with FSI, that's what you use, and you'll get all the additional security info you need.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Chad and Sean. I want to conclude by saying thank you to both of our presenters. Did a wonderful job, as well as our audience members and our sponsors. Today's webinar is being recorded, so you may rewatch for free anytime in the next year using the same link you used to log on today. And feel free to share the link with colleagues who may have missed today's event. Also, please email me at kstevens@medcore.com with comments, questions, and future webinar suggestions. And be sure to visit us at www.24x7mag.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.